And so I face my final curtain. My friends, I'll say it clear. We're going to get started now, people. If you could find a seat, please, I appreciate it. Mr. Cornicello, if we get some quiet in the back, I'd appreciate it. I'm just trying to be nice because it's such a festive time. If everyone could please take a seat, we're going to begin the meeting. That includes you, Mr. Yaker. We're going to begin this evening. Welcome to the February 8th meeting of the Lynbrook Board of Education. If we could all please stand for the flag. Mr. Pileski will lead us in the it's loud enough. Loud. Roll call or pleasure. If no one has any comments or changes, may I have a motion to accept the minutes of the January 11th, 2023 regular meeting? Mr. Luna, second. Mr. Pileski, all in favor? Art Garrelly, Mr. Kunz.
The Burns-Heidemann Gallery is proud to present the National Art Honor Society Induction Ceremony Art Show entitled The Gold Touch. Last night, 27 members were inducted into the 2023 Lynbrook High School National Art Honor Society. Each year, to accompany the NAHS induction ceremony, the students come together to create a group art exhibit. This year's exhibit, The Gold Touch, was chosen by the National Art Honor Society officers and provides the members with a theme to interpret and portray in their artwork. The Gold Touch was inspired by the Greek myth of King Midas, who had the power to turn everything he touched into gold. The artists Gustav Klimt and Sam Cannon were also used as inspiration, as they are known for their spin on gold artwork like The Kiss and The Lady in Gold. The Gold Touch presented many challenges to the members. In addition to determining the medium they would use, the members had to figure out a way to incorporate a touch of gold into their work. Each member approached this challenge in their own unique way. Whether the students created a portrait, a landscape, worked in charcoal or acrylic paint, created a digital work, or a piece of fashion, each created a work that incorporated a touch of gold. Please take a moment to enjoy the work from this year's National Art Honor Society Chapter 2686 inductees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kunz. Dr. Burak, presentations.
Yes, this evening is a very special evening, and for those of you at home, it took us a little longer to get everyone settled this evening because we have a lot to celebrate, starting with some student recognitions this evening. I'm going to ask Mr. Cirosi and Matthew Laverta to please come to the microphone. One of the, sure. One of the goals that Board of Education had this year was to implement the OWL Success Academy, which was an alternative learning environment for high school students. And we have some excellent news to present now that we're only midway through the school year, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Cirosi to share.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. It was a little under a year ago that we first met to discuss the idea of bringing an alternative program to LHS. Our goal from the beginning was to create a school within a school that would meet the needs of our non-traditional learners. From there, we got to work, and when designing what would become known as the OWL Success Academy, one of the students we had in mind from the very start is standing beside me tonight, Matthew Laverta. Matthew is a young man who is not afraid of hard work, and despite some academic challenges, Matt chose time and time again to do the hard thing, which was to continue to show up each day. His commitment, motivation, and willingness to accept help is what made him the perfect candidate for the Academy. Matthew came back in September motivated to finish his final 4 high school credits, which he successfully did just a few short weeks ago. I'd like to publicly thank Liz Bingham and Elisa Maggi from BOCES, who are in attendance here tonight, for being so responsive to our request as we look to build a solid foundation for the program. Also, thank you to 3 enormous supports for Matthew throughout the years. It certainly takes a village, and I believe Matthew earned this achievement in part because of the unconditional support he received from Dr. Mann, Mr. Rosenberg, and Mr. Brescia, who are all also in attendance and beside me tonight. Matthew, I can't tell you how incredibly proud we all are of your accomplishment and the example that this sets for current and future students. While I'd like and expect for you to be in attendance at Marion Street in June, tonight in front of this crowd, you will be awarded your high school diploma, which will open untold doors of opportunity for you now and in the future. For the presentation of the diploma, I invite the members of the Board of Education and Central Administration to come to the front of the dais. Start where? That's on me. Sorry, Matt. Dr. Burak, it is my honor to present to you the first graduate of the Lynbrook High School Owl Success Academy, Matthew Laverta. I do have one other item to share this evening, which even Matthew is unaware of. Last week, Mr. Rosenberg, who coordinates the Owl Academy, and I met with BOCES and admission representatives from SUNY Empire State College, which is an exclusively online college in the SUNY network. The purpose of that meeting was to discuss a potential partnership between our 2 schools. During that meeting, Matthew's name came up several times as the shining star of the academy. Matt, we've spoken many times about the value of earning a high school diploma and how it will open doors of opportunity for you. Please know that earning an associate's or bachelor's degree will open many, many more. SUNY Empire was so moved by your achievement that they asked for me to share with you a congratulatory letter informing you of your acceptance to SUNY Empire State College for the upcoming fall semester. So, why don't we go take pictures? We'll take a picture up there with the board, okay? Yeah, we can take a picture. As that picture's being set up, I do want to point out a final thing. Matthew, we had just learned tonight from the BOCES reps, you are the first student in New York State to be accepted through the SUNY program, through the special pilot program. So, just congratulations. Go take a picture. Okay, as a bonus, Matthew actually wanted to share a few of his thoughts with the Board of Education. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Matt.
No problem. I'm going to wait till everybody's seated.
Well, I first want to say thank you because, well, I'm honored and, like, flabbergasted to stand in front of you and accept these and finally get to say that I made my mom cry. But I do want to say that this program was amazing to have this year. I just wish that it was already in the makings when I first started because I felt that as I could have been out earlier. But I see this program working more and more with this school. And I'm very happy that Lynbrook was the very first high school to work with BOCES, from my understanding. So I want to shout out Coach Lowe if he's here, because he said one thing to me, and that was bet on you. And ever since he said that, I was like, bet on you. And I did that. I stuck to my ground. I said, you know what, I'm going to finish, and I did. I didn't worry about other kids. I didn't worry about if I was going to be done early. I was like, no, I want to get out. That's what I did. So I want to. And thank you for giving me your time to stand here in front of you guys. It's an amazing honor. And I hope, I really hope that this program is like here in 5 to 10 years. Thank you, thank you.
Of course, anything you need, man.
You should be very proud of your district. They really went all out for these kids and took a risk, and bravo to them. Good job. Okay, that's just one, folks. Number two, we are very proud to this year have been in the spotlight in the science research area by having yet another Regeneron semifinalist. And as you know, if you've read any of the articles, only 300 students in the nation are recognized for their science research work, and we again had one of them in Sean Kravitsky. Sean. Is he here? Is he not here? Sean? I thought he was here. Okay, we will get, Sean, we will get you your shirt. Good. We will get him a shirt, but we're very proud of Sean as well. Next one, last month, if you recall, we recognized a student who made the all-state soccer team. Well, the fall sports compete with each other all the time. This month, we are recognizing a student, an athlete who made the all-state football team, Michael Fagan.
Mrs. Fagan. guess we're happy he played this year.
He's going to stay up. Okay, now, while we don't have a formal program, it's so nice when we have opportunities for students to explore a passion and run with that passion and really expose their talents to the betterment of the high school and the district in general. And we have that in a young filmmaker. I'm going to call him a young filmmaker, Max Cords. So as you know, Coach Yeager was first-time football coach, a varsity football coach in Lynbrook schools. And he has made it quite known how happy he is to be the varsity football coach in his home district, the high school where he also attended. And he allowed Max, basically he embedded him in the football team. And it's astonishing that Max was able to put together basically a documentary of Coach Yeager's entire football season. Now, I did watch the hour plus of it, and that's saying a lot, Mr. Belmont, because he teases me regarding football all the time. But not yet, not yet, not yet. But when I watched it, I was in awe, because it's one thing to shoot video of someone, you know, catch a good thing, but you really saw how he was directing it. It felt good, right, to direct Coach Yeager, like what to do, tell him how to do this, tell him to do it again, that wasn't right, do it again, right? It's a little payback there. But what's even more astounding is, who knew we hired a potential Academy Award winner in Coach Yeager. So you're going to see the best of one of our students and the best of one of our coaches. So at this point, I would like to, you just need to see a glimpse of this. We're not going to show you the whole hour. That's okay. But just the beginning. Okay, that's a little glimpse. That was phenomenal. If anyone has an eye for this, that was an absolutely phenomenal job. The angles, everything, you know, Steven Spielberg would be very impressed with you. That's all I'm going to say. And if anyone has any connection to any sports media or anything, it's on YouTube, right? Anybody can go to it, forward it on to someone, and see what can become of you. So I'm looking forward to seeing your name up on the screen. So with that, all those associated with football, come on up.
And so we all see the link, so when you get home later, you can watch the other 3.5 hours of that video. So this evening is always a bittersweet night because we have retirements. And I've been doing this a long time, actually, doing retirements every year, and I always say how bittersweet it is. I was working from Florida last week, and you can imagine the number of retired teachers that are down there. And one I ran into was 80 years old, so he had actually been retired almost as long as he had actually worked. And I think when we do this every year, you forget how, unlike other jobs, teachers are really part of the community. Like other jobs where you produce things or you provide services, what they do and how they impact our kids lasts forever. You know, whether you're a kindergarten teacher or a high school teacher, whatever it may be, I think we lose that sometimes. We don't realize just how valuable those lessons are. And as I was talking to this older gentleman and he was reminiscing about what it's like, it really is a very special thing to be a teacher, and retirement is a goal they work towards and they accomplish. And so I think it really is a bittersweet thing. And I was just thinking about how special it is, the teachers we have had here, the generations of kids that they have taught, the number of times they've grown up in our town and they come back to live here and to work here. I think it's a very special thing. So it is sad night, especially looking at the number. We have 5 retirements tonight. And we will begin with, if he could stand, if he stands, if you could see him, Mr. LaCicero. Coach, where are you? Whereas Mr. Stephen LaCicero, social studies teacher and coach in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced his intention to retire effective June 30th, 2023, after a storied 32-year career at Lynbrook High School. And whereas during this time, Mr. LaCicero has continually delivered on a promise he made on his 1991 application to, quote, bring commitment, loyalty, and enthusiasm to your school. And whereas Mr. LaCicero has inspired thousands of students by teaching nearly the entire complement of social study courses offered in the building, finding his greatest impact by welcoming and challenging students in the advanced placement and honors level courses. And whereas Dr. Barbarino stated in Mr. LaCicero's tenure observation that his energy continues to shine beyond the confines of the classroom. Mr. LaCicero spent a career impacting students on our athletic fields and courts. Mr. LaCicero has served in several capacities, including head varsity football coach for 17 years, earning 81 victories, 15 playoff appearances, 8 Big Four appearances, 3 county final appearances, 1 county championship, and 1 Long Island championship. And whereas for the last 9 years, Mr. LaCicero has served as the head varsity girls basketball coach, where he has earned 103 wins and counting, 8 straight playoff appearances, 4 Elite 8 appearances, 1 Final Four appearance, and 1 county championship. In all, Mr. LaCicero coached a total of 63 seasons for the Lynbrook schools, accumulating that number by also serving as a coach for JV and middle school lacrosse, varsity golf, and varsity cross country. And whereas Mr. LaCicero has cemented his legacy in Lynbrook, as he will retire as the second winningest varsity head coach in not 1 but 2 sports, establishing this impressive feat in both football and girls basketball, where he has also received Coach of the Year honors for each sport respectfully. Whereas Mr. LaCicero's commitment to the Lynbrook community is evidenced by his choice to proudly raise his own children in the district, producing 4 Lynbrook High School graduates who have each gone on to succeed in their own fields. And whereas the Board of Education would like to thank Mr. LaCicero for his exceptional instruction and leadership, serving as a teacher, coach, and mentor to Lynbrook students for over 3 decades. And whereas the Board of Education wishes Mr. LaCicero a happy and healthy retirement, filled with time for reading and golf, and although he doesn't know it, pickleball, at his new home in North Carolina, spending time with his beautiful family, wife Jen, and Lynbrook High School alumni Nicholas, class of 13, Gabrielle, class of 14, Zachary, class of 16, and Sophia, class of 18. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mr. Stephen LaCicero for purposes of retirement effective June 30th, 2023. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't make some personal comments. And I was really thinking, Steve, what I was going to say, especially because it's public and it's recorded and it's taped. And I got to tell you that Matthew really helped me encapsulate what I wanted to say. So one, I want to thank you for not just being a friend, but for giving me access to the program, for letting me be part of that. I love football. And the times we spent together, and some of my fondest memories will be when we went away to those football clinics, and that's all we talked about and all we did. But, you know, probably the second greatest thing you could be called other than a father or dad is a coach. And I think Matthew's words, when he stood up there just now and said he gave you credit for saying, bet on you, those are the type of things that if you coach, you get it. If you coach, you understand it. To be able to have that experience and to be part of that, and for you to allow me to do that, in addition to my love for football, learning about it, but to see you and how you handled yourself, how you impacted those kids, those life lessons you taught, and allowed me the opportunity to do that, I will always be eternally grateful. So thank you. Stella Crew, please stand up.
Whereas Mrs. Maria Stella Crew, music teacher in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2023, after 29 years in the district. And whereas Mrs. Stella Crew graduated with a BS degree in music education from Hofstra University, and then received a graduate degree in aesthetic education from Adelphi University. Mrs. Stella Crew valued her college achievements that would later guide her students to their own achievements. Countless numbers of Mrs. Crew's students made all county festivals, starred in school musicals, have been accepted into the Tri-M Music Honor Society, and were even accepted into the prestigious All-State Festival that occurs annually in Rochester, New York. Whereas Mrs. Stella Crew has spent her Lynbrook career as the music teacher at West End School. Mrs. Crew taught first through fifth grade classroom music. Her students learned valuable general music knowledge, including note reading, differing rhythms, music styles, and songs from centuries ago. Mrs. Crew gave students a glimpse back into history by discussing famed composers from Bach and Mozart to jazz musicians like Louis Armstrong. Mrs. Crew will always be remembered for special performances such as first grade Thanksgiving Treasures and the second grade Famous Americans presentation. A favorite event for many was when Mrs. Crew led the entire school in a holiday sing-along the day before holiday break. These performances included heartfelt holiday tunes and cheerful winter songs. From standards like Feliz Navidad to Dreidel, Mrs. Crew exposed West End to a variety of music. A highlight was when Mrs. Crew would have students stand up with life-size paper candles to lead the way in the Christmas song, One Little Candle. To commemorate their final year in music class at West End, Mrs. Crew prepared fifth graders to sing at graduation. Whereas, in addition to teaching music, Mrs. Crew had a second role as the director of the fourth and fifth grade chorus and special ensemble. Mrs. Crew has been responsible for preparing students for countless concerts, working tirelessly to put on a beautiful performance at every concert. With props, solos, dancing, and more, each of their choir performances was a hit. And whereas, while instilling the love of music in her students, she also sought out opportunities for her students to perform for a variety of audiences. Mrs. Crew brought her choral students out into the Lynbrook community, sometimes performing 5 to 10 times throughout town in the evenings and on weekends in December to spread holiday joy. The chorus students have performed at assisted living homes, nursing homes, PTA events, and village tree lighting ceremonies. And whereas, as a member of the Nassau Music Educators Association, Mrs. Crew prepared students for their all-county performances, chaperoned rehearsals, and attended the event. Mrs. Crew was also a fixture at countless concerts at other schools in the Lynbrook district. One could often see Mrs. Crew as an audience member cheering on her music colleagues at Lynbrook High School, North and South Middle, Marion Street, and Waverly Park. Her support for her coworkers never went unnoticed at winter and spring concerts, musicals, and at the end of the year, Parents and Friends of Music Awards dinner. And whereas the Department of Fine and Performing Arts and the board wishes to thank Mrs. Maria Stella Crew for her 29 years of commitment to Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement with her husband Jeff and her mother Maria. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Maria Stella Crew for purposes of retirement effective the close of business, June 30th, 2023.
Margaret O'Brien, please stand up.
Whereas Mrs. Margaret O'Brien, reading interventionist in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 23, 2023, after more than 25 years of service to the principals, staff, students, and parents of the Lynbrook schools, and whereas Mrs. Margaret O'Brien began her teaching career as a classroom teacher at St. Raymond's School and swiftly transitioned to become a reading interventionist and tutor while also taking on the role of motherhood before coming to Lynbrook in 1997. Margaret has served as a reading interventionist in grades K through 8. After a short time as a part-time employee, Lynbrook sought after the talented reading interventionist, and Margaret was hired as a full-time employee in 1998. During her tenure in Lynbrook, she passionately taught students at both North and South Middle Schools, the Kindergarten Center, and Marion Street. Marion Street will always be her home, as it was the one constant in her many years teaching in Lynbrook. And whereas Mrs. Margaret O'Brien's thirst for knowledge and desire to pursue the most effective teaching methods meant that she has spent countless hours attending conferences and training with consultants and reading specialists to hone her skill set to the benefit of our students. Margaret's quest for knowledge and commitment to improving literacy instruction has led Lynbrook's emergent readers down a successful path. Margaret embraced every and any new reading intervention program to support her students. She mastered and successfully implemented a myriad of programs that included MegaWords, System 44, Great Leaps, Really Great Reading, Junior Great Books, LLI, and most recently, Sounds Right. She is a master reading interventionist and prides herself on being a Wilson certified reading instructor. Mrs. O'Brien has also implemented reading assessments and helped open the door for our classroom teachers to implement the best guided reading practices. She shared her expanding knowledge of reading and writing with her colleagues, classroom teachers, and parents throughout the years. And whereas Mrs. Margaret O'Brien's love of reading reached far beyond the small group settings that she provided, her kindergarten students enjoyed her implementation of Big Book of the Week. Ms. O'Brien has been noted to be an expert diagnostician and joined the district reading committee to examine our reading practices. She also inspired our students to participate in the Nassau Reading Council's Young Authors Contest. Mrs. O'Brien embraced emerging technology and utilized the internet to excite the students as they followed the journey of the Iditarod in real time. And whereas Mrs. Margaret O'Brien opened the world of books, stories, and adventures to her students as they learned to read, Mrs. O'Brien found ways to connect with her students. During a period of long separation from her students, she gladly called individual students at home and listened to them read to her over the phone. As her students were building their reading skills, they were also building confidence. Margaret's professionalism and knowledge about effective reading practices are the hallmark of her successful career. And whereas the Board of Education thanks Mrs. Margaret O'Brien for her commitment to Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement with her husband Bob, her son Luke, and wife Seton, granddaughter Anya, I'm sorry if I said them wrong, son Pat and his wife Claire, daughter Shannon and fiance Zach, and son Tim. Margaret will enjoy planning her daughter's wedding, brisk walks with family and friends, and competition on the pickleball court. And now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mrs. Margaret O'Brien for purposes of retirement effective June 30th, 2023.
Doreen Combs, please stand up.
Whereas Mrs. Doreen Combs, physical education teacher and coach in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2023, after a remarkable 39-year career in the Lynbrook Public Schools. And whereas during this time, Mrs. Combs has continually strived for each student to realize and reach their own potential. Innovative, enthusiastic, empathetic, diligent, and professional are just a few words used by colleagues to describe Mrs. Combs. And whereas Mrs. Combs started her teaching career in Franklin, Pennsylvania after studying at Slippery Rock State College, she returned home to Lynbrook in 1984 to work at LHS before transferring to Waverly Park Elementary. Mrs. Combs would then make a stop at South Middle School before eventually returning to her alma mater, Lynbrook High School, for the 2013-2014 school year. And whereas any administrator fortunate enough to observe Mrs. Combs would agree with Dr. John Byer's sentiment when he said, quote, "One comes away from her class feeling they have seen a maestro at work in creating a carefully orchestrated symphonic experience," end quote. And whereas Mrs. Combs continually raised the bar in both her classroom and on the athletic field, where her coaching career began in 1984. As the varsity soccer coach, Mrs. Combs served for 20 years and accumulated 7 conference championships, 1 county championship, and 1 Long Island championship. Mrs. Combs always kept academics a priority, as evidenced by her soccer teams earning 9 Team Scholar Athlete Awards. Working with our JV and varsity softball teams for 14 years, Mrs. Combs brought home 2 conference championships and 5 additional Team Scholar Athlete Awards. And whereas Mrs. Combs continually led by example, as evidenced by an incident early in her coaching career when Dr. Byer noted afterward that, quote, "I'm sure the players appreciate the fact that they need only to look at their coach to find an example of courage and heroism," end quote. And whereas the Board of Education would like to thank Mrs. Combs for her exceptional commitment to accountability, exceeding expectations in any role that she took on. All told, Mrs. Combs received Nassau County Coach of the Year honors 3 times, Teacher of the Year honors twice, and is a member of the Lynbrook Honor Roll. And whereas the Board of Education wishes Mrs. Combs a happy and healthy retirement, enjoying the Florida sun while spending time with her beautiful family, wife Lori, and son Jesse, as he excitedly begins his post-high school journey. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mrs. Doreen Combs for purposes of retirement effective June 30th, 2023. I just have to echo the sentiments that were in this resolution. Mrs. Combs and I go back to, I think, the year 2000, when my oldest son started Waverly, and all 3 of my boys were lucky enough to have her as a teacher, and we wish you the best.
All right, Bonnie, get on up. So, Bonnie, let me begin by saying if Mom could make it here tonight, she said she would have been here, but she passed on her gradually. All right. And by the way, being that you started here about 50 years ago, I got like a novel here for you, Shapiro. Whereas Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro began her career at Waverly Park Elementary School as a first grade teacher in 1973. But when I think about it, Bonnie, that's when I was in second grade. So had you had me, I don't know if you would have made it this long. Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro spent the following 8 years teaching various grade levels at Waverly Park Elementary School, including kindergarten, first and second grade. In 1981, Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro decided to take some time off to raise her daughters. And whereas Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro began to miss working with children and still had a personal connection to Lynbrook Public Schools, she decided to approach Dr. Byer and applied for a half-day teaching position in the newly created Lynbrook Kindergarten Center supplemental program in 1996. The rest is history. And whereas Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro never left the kindergarten center, and she transitioned into a full-time kindergarten teacher in 1998, educating children for the past 25 years as the green class teacher in room number 10. 17 of these years were spent teaching several types of inclusion models. The last 13 years, Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro spent teaching the integrated co-teaching model with Mrs. Nicole DeMichelle, her buttercup. And whereas Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro speaks with love and respect for all her students and placing great emphasis on celebrating each child's individual accomplishments, Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro will always make her students feel safe and welcomed, and importantly, her unique ability to make each child feel that they are exceptional. This is all due to the heart of gold Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro holds for her students. And whereas Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro's classroom is a delight for the mind and eyes, every space is decorated so beautifully and highlighted with her students' work. It is obvious that this is an environment that has supported and encouraged her students to reach for the stars. Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro's energy is limitless, as she often closes up the kindergarten center by working late to prepare for the next day's lesson or to redecorate her bulletin boards. Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro is also one of the first teachers to arrive back in August, planning and decorating a beautiful classroom for her students. Whereas Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro is a teacher who is highly requested by parents year after year and bragged about within the Lynbrook community. History repeats itself, and Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro has made sure her reputation remains strong over the past 33 years. And whereas Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro has given 33 notable years in Lynbrook Public Schools, along with an extraordinary amount of volunteer positions and awards. PTA president at Waverly Park Elementary School for 2 years. During this time, Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro raised funds to build the first playground at Waverly Park. Member of the Lynbrook High School Shared Decision-Making Committee, established the first swim team at Lynbrook High School. Girl Scouts of Nassau County, volunteer at Waverly Park, Founders Day Award winner. Honor Roll, World of Difference Committee, Club Advisor for SKIP, Mentors of Long Island, Character Education Committee, Multicultural Committee, Relay for Life, and of course, the Kindergarten Center's Sunshine Event Coordinator, planning holiday parties, bridal and baby showers, always remembering to acknowledge the important events in the lives of her colleagues. And whereas Mrs. Shapiro does have a life outside the Kindergarten Center, with her husband Michael, former residents of Lynbrook, now residing in Oceanside, sharing a very special bond for their daughters and spouses, Stephanie, Mason, Allison, Derek, Emily, and Ben. What makes Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro's life outside the kindergarten even more special is spending evenings and weekends with her grandchildren, Zoe, Wes, Sam, Oliver, Maisie, and new granddaughter on the way, due in May. Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro will now be able to travel to Brooklyn, Astoria, and Rockville Center and spend quality time with her grandchildren, visiting the local toy stores, going to lunch, or even a sleepover. Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro will always find some extra time to spend long weekends in Montauk with her husband Michael, her best friend, sister Jill, and brother-in-law Kenny, as well as spending time in Palm Springs, hiking and working out with her sister Jill. Michael may even be able to get a new fishing partner. You never know. And whereas Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro will be missed by her colleagues, parents, and students, Lynbrook Public Schools is losing the gem of an educator who has given her life to teaching and making sure all of our students are loved and taken care of. We were incredibly lucky. Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro has spent hours has been ours for the past 33 years. We never say goodbye at the kindergarten center, Bonnie. You can always come back, and we know you will. Whereas the Board of Education thanks Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro for her commitment to the Lynbrook Public Schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mrs. Bonnie Shapiro for purposes of retirement effective June 30th, 2023. If all the retirees could please come to the front. If all the retirees could please come up to the front for a photo. Stella, Steve, Doreen. Thank you. The whole board should really go up. The whole board should really go up. Right? When you think about that, it's like 200 years. You can go. I'll go. there goes about 200 years and 100 people. All right, Sal, get him outside, Sal. Get him outside, Sal. As we move on with the meeting, Carlos Diaz, could you please stand up? Congratulations, new assistant head custodian at the high school. Welcome, Carlos. Congratulations. Moving on to reports from trustees. Tara, your report on the annual board PTA meeting?
Yep. So we had our annual meeting with PTA Council on January 25th. Most of the conversation focused on college planning. We really kind of discussed and brainstormed ways in which we could better support students and families throughout the process. Since our meeting, administration has already begun to develop a plan to address timelines, and they're working on developing communication strategies to really help parents step by step throughout the whole college planning process. PTA is also looking for ways to support parents. So overall, I think it was a really great meeting, very productive, and great conversation. Also, I know I mentioned it last meeting, but I also wanted to remind everybody that Founders Day is Monday, February 13th at 7 p.m. at the high school. So if you're around on Monday, please come. It really is such a great night.
Moving on to DEI, Mrs. Marcus.
The next DEI council meeting will be taking place next Tuesday. At this meeting, we will be discussing the building level committee's progress toward the goals of the DEI plan. Also, buildings will have an opportunity to share about their recent events and celebrations, including Lunar New Year, Black History Month, and Holocaust Remembrance Day, which I know Dr. Balekis will be talking more about later during his report. Thank you.
Anything else from any of the other board members?
Yes, I wanted to mention a few of us attended the Chamber of Commerce dinner where a few people from Lynbrook were recognized, and one of those people was Dr. Burak, and it was a beautiful night, and it was really nice to see leaders of Lynbrook who were honored, and it was nice for all of us in attendance there.
I had the opportunity to see John Halligan present Ryan's story. It was a joint event between the North and South middle schools, and he talks about really the tragedy of what cyberbullying can do and how parents can help protect their children from that. I enjoyed Cabaret Night at the high school a couple weeks ago, where some of our fantastic high school musicians and performers put on acts of their choosing, and including some humor thrown in there, and that was a really nice night. And then unfortunately they didn't win, but the basketball team had a very good, strong fundraiser for the Wounded Warriors Project, the boys varsity basketball team, a couple of weeks ago, and that was a great event to go to.
I also wanted to mention I took a trip parallel to the music trip and had the wonderful opportunity to watch our musicians perform in Disney Springs, and our band march down Main Street in Disney. And what an unbelievable, proud moment to see. I mean, none of my own personal children were marching down Main Street, but just to see Lynbrook students marching down the street was amazing. It was just an amazing experience, really, for the whole town. It was great to see them. They did such a great job, and when they were performing in Disney Springs, there were people in the audience saying, wow, who are these students? They're great. So that's a testament to our great department. And last night, I had the opportunity to attend the National Art Honor Society, and the talent coming out of the students is unbelievable. One piece of artwork was just more amazing than the next. So if you have a minute before you leave tonight, just take a look in the Burnside Gallery, because you will be blown away.
And I forgot one other thing. A few weeks ago, I attended in representing our board at a joint Nassau Suffolk County Boards Association and Superintendents Association meeting where Tom DiNapoli, the state comptroller, was talking about the state of the state economy and what that means for schools. And the news is good for this year, but the news is not looking as pretty a couple of years down the road, so that's just something we'll have to all be ready for as boards and communities.
Seeing nothing else from the board, there is no old business, so Dr. Lynch will present the bond financial update.
Nothing more exciting than a little bond accounting to end your night. So if you remember, we began a process 6 years ago of putting forth a major bond, and there were several projects that were done. Just to remind you, it wasn't all just about the high school. It was a comprehensive district-wide event. So at the kindergarten center, we put air conditioning in the gymnasium and also remodeled the wrestling room there. At North Middle School, we put air conditioning in the gymnasium and renovated locker rooms. Same thing happened at South. Marion Street, we did air conditioning. Waverly, we did air conditioning. And West End, we did air conditioning. And then, of course, the big project here at the high school, additions, which is behind me, and renovations, which was in front of us in the old banana wing. So here's the final costs. So when all was said and done, we spent a little over $1 million at the kindergarten center, a little less than $1 million at North, a little more than $1 million at South, $888,000 at Marion Street, $583,000 at Waverly, $727,000 at West End, and $26 million at the high school. So that all comes to a total of $31,428,139 on the entire bond. Those numbers are still at the high school subject to a slight change. That's why there's a little asterisk there. It may just be a couple more thousand just as we start to close out the project. There might be a few more things that need to be, but we hope to have everything closed out really by June 30th. So on October the 3rd, 2017, you authorized us to spend $33,925,603 for proposed bond projects. You permitted us to borrow $28,925,603 in bonds. You then authorized us to use $5 million from a particular reserve fund, a building reserve fund, to complete the projects. I'm happy to report that the final expenditures were $31,428,139, which means we were under budget by approximately $2.5 million. So now technically, this is where it gets a little, we had to consult with bond counsel, we had to consult with general counsel, we had to consult with fiscal advisors to find out, okay, what's the status when you have money left over? So we spent the bonded money first. We have already started to pay back those bonds. We're going to be in year 3 of that payback period. So the remaining funds are technically those reserve funds. So even though I did a bank transfer to cover bills, the funds are technically still in that former reserve. So right now they will be in the old building renovation reserve, waiting for more voter approval. So the purpose of the fund is to do building renovations. It can only be used for building renovations, so that would take a referendum. Just like you're going to hear on March 1st, there's going to be a capital referendum. It will be one of those in the future, and the board has some other options about disbanding that reserve and possibly using it for other purposes. So that's the accounting of the bonds. Questions from the board?
I don't have any questions, but I'd just like to commend the district on bringing in a huge project like that under budget. If any of you have ever done home renovations, you know they tend to come in over budget. So I appreciate the fiscal prudency that we had in getting that to happen.
And I just do, Mr. Seda is in the audience tonight. We hired a construction manager, but we really hired a construction manager, and he was on our payroll. So that's, Jim, we thank you for everything that you did. Just sleepless summers, muddy boots. When it's kind of like you can look back nostalgically on the good old days when we were turning red in the face, yelling at contractors. It was a big project, but really with his leadership, it was astounding. And the crew here at the high school, the teachers who had so much patience as things were getting up and running. It was just a great community project, and we just thank you all. And we're happy to bring it in under budget, and we're happy to file out the cost reports, and let's let the state aid start to flow. Thanks a lot.
No questions from the board. Dr. Burek, Superintendent's report.
Okay, it's time for my project lift off update. We are moving on to the only one more month of this, folks. Okay. The art patch. The art patch process began, and all of the patches were collected on February 6th. So just so you know, an additional 118 students engaged in the art patch on the secondary level. So we have 118 secondary level entries for the art patch and 170 elementary entries. So we had a great number of students participate in that piece. They're in the process of narrowing them down to the finalists for all the buildings. And we will take 4 elementary and 4 secondary finalists, and then we will send them to a finalist committee. And that committee is actually the art staff of a neighboring school district. And they will choose the winning patches for both the elementary and secondary levels. And at the March 8th meeting is when I will announce the winners, and those winners will be the art patches that fly off into space with the winning experiment, which was developed by Mr. Murray's son. So it's a great project, It continues. Now, I know the question everybody's been waiting for, what does next year look like, and when can I plan my vacations for next year? Tonight, the board will be adopting the 2023-2024 school calendar. There's actually some nice long breaks in there for you. So that's something that will be posted on the website shortly after the board approves it this evening, so you can make your future plans. Next update is UPK. We've already started to receive phone calls regarding the Universal Pre-K program. Last week, the state aid numbers came out, and we did receive an increase in funding for UPK. At this point, we cannot give an exact number of students that we could accommodate in the UPK program, because the budget was really just the governor's proposed budget. The legislature still has to vote on it, so there is not yet a state budget. And there is talk that the per pupil allotment is actually going to increase. So I can't go out and say we have enough money for 150 some odd students, because there is significant talk about increasing the per pupil amount from 5,400 up. So when we get more information with regard to that, we will be able to give the community an exact number. However, in anticipation of that, we're not going to sit back and wait for that, because that could take until April. And we know that people are very anxious in trying to find out, what they're going to do for pre-K. So we know that we have an existing program, and they have a certain number of seats. If we have enough money to go beyond those seats, we will be in search of another program that we could actually house the overflow students in another program. So we are in the process of putting together an RFP, which is a request for proposal, to seek out another vendor, potential vendor, for additional students for a UPK program. So we're working on that now, and as soon as we have that and put it out on the street, I'll give you another update when we have more information with regard to that. But we are moving forward with that, so just people, parents at home, if you're waiting for that, please continue to listen to this meeting. We will be putting information on our website and pushing it out on Facebook when we have additional information regarding that for next year. Just a reminder, the summer playground survey went out. We have our traditional summer playground program, but there was a request to investigate an extended program. So a survey went out, and Dr. Berman, do you want to say anything additional to that?
Sure. So the survey is out. If you have not had an opportunity to reply to the survey, please do so. It will be available until the 14th of the month, and then we'll have additional information next month concerning the next steps.
And Dr. Beleca's curriculum update?
Thank you, Dr. Burek. Students in both middle schools and the high school
viewed the film The Barn on the eve of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and they discussed it on the next day. In addition, throughout the school year, students in the middle school, they read Daniel's story as a novel, and the Holocaust is actually taught at both the middle and the high school as part of the World War units. So all the things that we do on International Holocaust Day are reinforced in the curriculum throughout the school year. At the elementary level, they were doing school-wide read-alouds, including Martin and Anne, and excerpts from The Butterfly. There are plenty of follow-up activities that happen both on that day and other times throughout the year. In the intermediate grades, so the upper elementary school grades, students colored and wrote responses on paper butterflies, expressing their hopes for the world and messages of peace and love. The students in those grades will also read books including Number of the Stars, The Yellow Star, Beto and the Night of the Broken Glass, The Whispering Town, The Cats in Kerensky Square, Star of Fear, Star of Hope, and Jars of Hope. There are also activities planned to lead to the presentation by Marion Lazan. Also at the lower levels, so in the primary grades in the kindergarten center, more age-appropriate activities occur there as well. Students study cultures around the world, including Judaism. The book One Candle was read during the month of December that discusses Hanukkah during the time of the Holocaust. And units throughout the year focus on topics such as my community and what communities may look like, including places, people, and religions, and families now and long ago, and finally, respect. My second update for tonight is from the Assessment Committee. The Assessment Weighting Grading Commission had its third meeting on January 17th. The goals for assessing students we developed during the December meeting were shared as the philosophical framework for the further discussions. The commission was divided into 3 subgroups representing the humanities, sciences, and other courses. These groups began examining grading practices within those areas for consistency, transparency, etc., and developed survey questions to ask our neighboring districts. During the next meeting, which is scheduled for tomorrow, February 9th, we will be reviewing and discussing the results of both internal and external surveys regarding various aspects of assessment, weighting, and grading practices. Finally, the high school administration and I would really like to extend a special thanks to all of the students who participated and brought a critical perspective to the conversations. It was a really good student turnout, and they were all very vocal during our last meeting. So we were very pleased that they came out in numbers. Thank you.
And Dr. Lynch, capital projects?
Capital projects update. The 3 main projects that are up at State Ed right now are the North Turf Field, the Marion Street Turf Field and Grounds project, and the West End Roof project. We hope to get them out of the state by the springtime so we can put it out to bid. The Waverly Park tennis court renovation and pickleball renovation has already been awarded and should begin in the spring, as will the high school library renovation.
I just want to go back a second. On the Assessment, Grading, and Weighting Committee, are they just looking at end of the year, or are they looking at like assessment, grading, weighting throughout like the class to make them kind of equivalent through like classes, quizzes will be equal to this? Are they examining
Well, I don't know if everyone is going to come to a conclusion that everything has a specific % across the board, but they are looking at everything soup to nuts. So
Okay,
basically at the last meeting, they took the entire package of syllabi for certain departments, and they brought all that information, compiled it to say this is what the students are being judged upon in the majority of math classes, science classes, and those were put in that math science group. They did the same thing with the humanities and then the other group. Why the other group is the other group, that is your group that's not taking Regents exams.
So looking at the classes as a whole.
I'm sorry?
The classes as a whole.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
This time we'll move to public comment. If anyone would like to address the board, please come to the podium, identify yourself, and indicate if you live in or out of the district.
Good evening. My name is Tom Clancy. I am a district resident. With your permission, I'd like to bring something up for you guys to take a look at. Dr. Berman, this may look familiar. So I'd like to first start by thanking Dr. Berman and Dr. Lynch. Over the course of the last month or so, Christine Stanton and I have met twice with both of them at their office to discuss the options for getting late buses added to the district budget for the 2023-2024 school year. Dr. Berman truly went above and beyond, so I'd like to say a special thank you to that, so far as to actually call some of the individual schools and some of the surrounding areas to get the information that's required, so that hopefully we can, when we're discussing this matter, that we can do this in a systematic and kind of metrics-based approach when considering adding late buses to next year's budget. The information provided to us during these meetings is really what we were looking for last year when we first began to talk about this endeavor. For those of you that were not on the board last year or not familiar with this, I represent a vast majority of parents that are asking for late buses to be added to the district budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. The late bus is required so our kids can partake in many of the after-school activities offered by their respective schools, from volunteer work to extracurricular academic activities to sports and recreational clubs and simple extra help. There have been many days when our children have had to elect to not participate in these activities because there was not a safe, reliable way to get them home, when we as parents were unable to pick them up for a multitude of reasons. When we proposed this to the board last year, we were told no because of the budget impact it would have given the anticipated cost of $1.2 million for late buses. If you recall, I challenged those numbers last year, went so far as to actually go through and thoroughly read the entire independent auditor's report, and I concluded that those numbers might be a bit inflated. Given the facts presented to us by Dr. Berman and Dr. Lynch during our meetings, I now understand where those figures came from. And I'm confident that if we look at this closely together and hear out what we're trying to propose, that you realize that the actual budget impact is literally a fraction of that $1.2 million. So Dr. Berman was kind enough to put together the worksheets that I shared with you guys. You'll see from these that there are currently 45 schools that Lynbrook offers public transportation to. 7 in-district schools, 12 special ed schools, 4 BOCES schools, and 22 non-public schools. The current Lynbrook Union Free School District adopted bylaws states that in order for a late bus to be added to a district budget, it cannot be offered to select schools. Under these current guidelines, it has to be offered to all schools. I'm asking the board tonight to reconsider the criteria that you guys are currently using to establish which schools may be eligible for late busing by adjusting the calculus by which that you guys use to determine, to make this determination from a common sense approach, which you all have the right to do. First, I'm asking that the board vote on whether or not to allow late bus transportation be offered only to get our kids back into Lynbrook at a central drop-off point. We're not asking for a door-to-door service. Should this be agreed to, you'll preclude the need to offer late busing to all of those in-district schools, as well as Our Lady of Peace, since that school and those schools are already in town and do not require the need to safely get our kids back to Lynbrook. If you were to do so, the number of schools eligible for a late bus drops from 45 to 38. If you look at the enrollment numbers of the schools on the list provided, you'll see that 31 of those remaining 38 schools have an enrollment of less than 4 students, with the vast majority, 25 in fact, of those schools only having 1 or 2 kids enrolled. The approximate cost per late bus run is $24,000 per year, per school, as indicated by Dr. Berman's anticipated cost. My second ask of you tonight is for the board to look at the need assessment in terms of the number of children that would benefit from this. If we establish a minimum number of students that would be eligible and benefit from a late bus enrollment of at least 5 students per school, the number of schools that would be eligible for a late bus drops from 31 to 7. One of these schools that are on this list of 7 is actually a non-public elementary middle school that is less than 2 miles away from Lynbrook High School, and it could be argued that the need for a late bus for that school is questionable. But in fairness to the criteria I'm asking for, I factored that school into the equation. So using Dr. Berman's estimate of approximately $24,000 per year for those 7 schools, the anticipated budget impact goes from what was previously thought to be $1.2 million to $168,000. So that's $168,000 down from $1.2 million. And that's the worst case scenario. Should the board be agreeable to making the revision to the criteria. Assuming that the number of students that uses the late bus is only 5 per student, which in actuality it'll probably in some cases more, some cases less, that equals a total cost of $4,800 per student. And although the cost of that per child could be as little as $3,400 per student if, say, 7 kids per school benefited from this late bus. So Lynbrook's PPE, the per pupil expenditure for 2020-21 was $27,601. And given what the district saves by these students not attending Lynbrook Public Schools, $4,800 per student still results in a net savings of $22,801 per student, or $798,035 per school year for each of those 35 children. Should this come to pass and we do get the late bus added to the revised budget, Dr. Berman has kindly agreed to speak with the surrounding school districts which currently offer late busing for their children, specifically Hewlett and East Rockaway, and discuss a piggybacking system which we currently use for other services in the district, thereby lowering the total overall cost even further if we can share the busing with these other districts. So I am asking the board to vote on changing the bylaws so that late busing may be offered to a singular drop-off point in town, and that the number of students eligible be revised to a minimum of 5 students per school. Should this vote come to pass, I am asking the board to ask Dr. Lynch and Dr. Berman to add these revised figures to the upcoming budget workshop meeting. Thank you guys very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Clancy.
Good evening. Thank you, Tom, for your eloquent explanation of the data collected by the Late Bus Committee. I would like to personally express my gratitude
If
to
you could just
Dr.
identify yourself and the.
Oh, I'm
routine.
sorry. Christine Stanton, I'm a resident. Thank you. I would like to personally express my gratitude to Drs. Lynch and Berman for your time and patience in meeting with both of us. As Tom mentioned, Dr. Berman, you went above and beyond to help us gather this data, and we are very appreciative. Our children stay after school every day for extra help, academic clubs, test prep, student publications, athletics, and a myriad of co-curricular clubs and extracurricular activities. My own children stay after school 5 days a week. Their day does not end at 3 o'clock. This proposal, based on ridership, is a tremendous compromise, saving the district over $1 million from the original estimated cost. What we are asking for is less than 0.1% of the total budget. I would like to take a moment to discuss one important consideration that has not yet been discussed, and that is safety. Without late bus transportation, our children must rely on public transit to return to Lynbrook. For many, this involves waiting in Jamaica, Queens for a Lynbrook-bound train. MTA police report a spike in crime on the Long Island Railroad, with major crime up 71% and robberies up 200%. While the cost of increased security measures in our public schools is undeniably essential, I ask you to please consider the safety of our private school students as well. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms.
Hi, I'm Abby Manasakis, Lynbrook resident. I'm also a board member for the Lynbrook SEPTA. I just wanted to come up here and say that I'm representing SEPTA tonight, and I wanted to thank you for accepting our donation for the first communication board that's going to be placed at the Marion Street Playground. Some people may be wondering why it's beneficial to have a playground communication board, so I'm just going to share a few with you. So it creates a social opportunity to ask friends to play on different equipment or to do different activities. It will also have feelings on it, so they can talk about any feelings. It can label things that they see. They can use it to talk about if they like an activity or they do not like an activity.
Could you expand a little bit, because now that you bring it up and I have it to read, but give maybe, you're giving the specific, give an overall understanding of what the communication board is.
So a communication board is giant board. It's about, I don't have exact sizes, and it will have different pictures for children who cannot communicate. Most districts around here, as well as local playgrounds in Nassau County, Suffolk County, all over, have these. So we, with SEPTA, are fundraising, and we want to put one of these boards in every playground so that children communicate. Not just for the children who verbally cannot communicate, but also for the children who can verbally communicate, but let's say they have motor planning issues and what they say is, you know, not intelligible by what other people understand them and who they're communicating with. Also, if children are shy, if, you know, it might be easier for them to point, especially if it's a new person or a new aide or somebody watching them. It's also, you know, a very good thing to get children to talk between each other, whether you're verbal or nonverbal, because you all just want to play and have a good time. So we think it's really important to give our kids a way to communicate and express their wants, needs, and feelings with others. So please help us and continue to support Lynbrook SEPTA. There's also a Lynbrook Swag is doing a sponsorship program that's going to be open for 2 weeks. And if you donate to buy a t-shirt, or you can go on the Lynbrook Member Hub to just donate money if you do not want the t-shirt. We plan to raise money to put this in Marion Street, Waverly, West End, and the Kindergarten Center. And we also have heard from the Lynbrook community. They're going to get involved to put this in their 2 parks in the district.
What are the 2 websites you were referring to?
Lynbrook Swag is the company that is going to sell the t-shirts and put the names on them for everybody who's sponsoring us. The other website is Member Hub. It's what the PTA uses.
I know, you're just being recorded, and I think you're attempting to reach more than us, so anyone who watches this will understand.
Actually, I'm attempting to reach whoever wants to
Whoever
listen
wants
and
to
help.
listen to you, I got it.
But I'm here to say thank you to you guys for accepting it, because this is something we've wanted to do.
And
Well,
the
then thank-
T-shirts are really nice with the Shamrock and the Lynbrook, so go get
Thank
one.
you. So thank you very much.
Well, we thank you for raising the money and making the donation.
Thank you.
Hi, Ivy Riley, resident. Speaking of t-shirts, the 2023 National PTA Board of Directors published a position statement that recognizes that proper nutrition is imperative to health, development, and academic achievement of children, noting that food insecurity and hunger is directly linked to lower reading and math scores, falling behind peers academically and socially, and may lead to increased risk of behavior issues such as anxiety, hyperactivity, and aggression. I have a copy of the position statement here, which I would like to share with you. I'm going to just note some of the most important parts, and you can read it in full later at your leisure. National PTA supports and advocates for legislation and wellness policies which provide, among other things, measurable goals and best practices to enable schools to obtain fresh, healthy foods, ensure a proper amount of time for students to eat, expansion of school meal programs to provide facilities to serve meals, and to provide training for school nutrition staff. National PTA also supports flexibility in preparing and serving meals that recognizes diverse student dietary needs and cultural preferences. With this in mind, the District Food Committee, which I'm happy to be a member of, a lot of people came up last board meeting and expressed some opinions, and I am here to express mine. The Food Committee, when it last met, discussed that the district's current plan addresses a number of items that coincides with PTA's position. So I just want to take a minute to discuss some of these issues that were raised. The first one is allergies. Just like making sure no child goes hungry in Lynbrook is a top priority, Attention to those with dietary concerns and allergies is non-negotiable. We've been ensured that disclosure of allergy and other nutritional information should be readily available and on the website. And in addition, we have requested that grab-and-go pre-labeled items are available for those with most severe allergy concerns, which others, such as those who keep kosher, could also benefit from. Quality control. This is a subject we can speak about ad nauseum, because if you ask a middle schooler who's never even tried the food, they will say it's gross. But that's just untrue. Or if it is, it doesn't have to be, right? So not only do we have some level of control over the products, such as offering only Boar's Head products, but there are government incentives offered for taking advantage of local farm-to-table programs where schools are given 25 cents instead of the 6 cents on the dollar for participating in these co-op type programs. So we can actually take advantage of increased funding to help the school budget by giving our children fresher and greener foods. The third thing, cost to us. Parents, taxpayers, that's always what it comes down to. New York State PTA strongly advocated for Governor Hochul to include funding in the proposed budget to provide free breakfast and lunch for all public school children, as it did in 2020 to 2022. But as you may know, Governor Hochul did not do so. That said, Dr. Lynch has expressed many times that the school meal program only costs the district about $5,000 per year and is already part of the budget. So the district already approved the expansion of cafeteria at Marion Street, and other elementary schools are in great need of an overhaul. It must be said that you cannot have a meal program without proper facilities, and we currently do not have them in our elementary schools. So this needs to be a priority. So some facts. Did you know that a family of 4 making at least $51,400 per year does not qualify for free or reduced meals? Most people in Lynbrook are unaware that there are low-income families and even some homeless students attending our schools who rely on school meals to eat every single day. School meals are much more affordable than that of local eateries, and we all know the prices of groceries are at an all-time high. We continue to provide cold meals to students in need, but not every child takes advantage of it. National PTA strongly opposes any policies that prevent children from receiving a meal equivalent, a full meal equivalent to their peers. While my children love taking advantage of elementary school special lunches, not every child is able to afford those meals, and it does often embarrass children who cannot afford them, whether or not that is the intention. For multiple reasons, PTA is not permitted to give free lunches to students who do not order special lunch, so those children will always be excluded from that program. Someone spoke last time at this podium and said, I would give back every t-shirt in my kid's drawer to give another child the chance to eat a meal. I mean, wouldn't you? I always get so emotional, I'm sorry, but it's just so important to me that children don't go hungry. As you know, I'm very involved in PTA, and I've been involved in all levels in this district and in Nassau region, and while I do not speak particularly for one particular unit, PTA position statements and resolutions may be used by any member to advocate for a position that aligns with PTA goals. I want to be clear that I am not here to downplay how important culture and tradition is in this community. There is no argument that many of our traditions are what make us such a special place. However, it is just as important to recognize that there is no F in PTA. Fundraising can be creative and profitable without food in the equation. Just ask Gridiron and the football team. If we are able to feed one hungry child because we have implemented a school lunch program, is it not worth it to forego that one more t-shirt that gets stuffed in a drawer? And because I'm a very visual person, I brought a visual with me to support my point. This is something I created for my son after 5th grade of things he did from 1st to 5th grade. These are what became of all the t-shirts that he got for free that he never wore again. As beautiful as it is, it gets stuffed in a closet and it's never looked at again. I would rather give a kid a meal than make this blanket, which cost me even more money to buy, than to worry that a child goes hungry in Lynbrook. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Seeing nothing else in the audience, we're moving on. Next area is donations. The board would like to gratefully accept and acknowledge the following donations. $3,250.15 from Lynbrook SEPTA to purchase and install an augmentative communication board for the Marion Street Playground. $1,500 from the W20 Foundation on behalf of the Team Up 4 community program, a recognition of the community service efforts performed by the football team for Camp Anchor to purchase a defensive reaction machine. $1,000 from the Toshiba America Foundation to be used to purchase materials and supplies for the effects of ocean acidification and microplastic project at the high school. $775 from the Marion Street PTA to be used to fund a performance of a day in clay potter's wheel assembly, and $102.58 from the Kindergarten Parents Club fundraiser for student activities. Moving on to superintendent's recommendations, I'd like to ask for consent agenda on resolutions 2302C1 through 2301C7, 2302NC1 through 2302NC2, 2302G1 through 2302G40. May I have a motion, please? Mr. Murray, second. Mrs. Danino, all in favor? May I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mr. Luna, second. Ms. Telesky, all in favor? In lieu of the work session, nope, you always got me with something, Terry. Should pack that. All right, meeting is over. Our next meeting will be a budget session on March 1st. Everyone be safe. Enjoy the vacation later in the month.